President Trump has held multiple news conferences, gaggled on Air Force One multiple times, and sat down for a two-part interview on Fox News, which aired last week. As Politico summed it up best, Trump is everywhere again. And that's because President Trump has a great story to tell about the legendary American revival that is well underway. And in keeping with this revolutionary media approach that President Trump deployed during the campaign, the Trump White House will speak to all media outlets and personalities, not just the legacy media who are seated in this room. Because according to recent polling from Gallup, Americans' trust in mass media has fallen to a record low. Millions of Americans, especially young people, have turned from traditional television outlets and newspapers to consume their news from podcasts, blogs, social media, and other independent outlets. It's essential to our team that we share President Trump's message everywhere and adapt this White House to the new media landscape in 2025. To do this, I am excited to announce the following changes will be made to this historic James S. Brady briefing room, where Mr. Brady's legacy will endure. This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment, so it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. And you can apply now on our new website, whitehouse.gov/newmedia. Starting today, this seat in the front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat. My team will review the applications and give credentials to new media applicants who meet our criteria and pass United States Secret Service requirements to enter the White House complex. So in light of these announcements, our first questions for today's briefing will go to these new media members whose outlets, despite being some of the most viewed news websites in the country, have not been given seats in this room.
Karoline Leavitt making her debut. The T is silent. Trump's White House press secretary and warning reporters she ain't no binder.
We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. We know for a fact there have been lies that have been pushed by many legacy media outlets in this country about this president, about his family, and we will not accept that. We will call you out when we feel that your reporting is wrong or there is misinformation about this White House. So yes, I will hold myself to the truth, and I expect everyone in this room to do the same.
Sandra, in the green room, you were telling me that this girl did a terrible job.
No, she did a fantastic job. We carried this live during America Reports, and she came in there prepared. I don't think you can argue that. She took questions. She took questions from the front of the room. She took questions from the back of the room. She laid out a couple changes that could be interesting. In fact, she said one of the seats that has historically been a seat for a White House staff member is now going to be a new media seat. She wants more representation from podcasts and social media influencers and all these other areas where people in modern days get their news, so that it's not just the legacy media from whom she also took questions in that room. She did a great job. Great job.
Yes. She's still not a, lesbian woman of color, but I'm okay with it, Jessica, because she has a diversity of opinion. You and I probably would agree that you were listening to a person that had direct access to the president, as opposed to KJP. Is that how you say it? From
That's
before?
fine. I don't. Korean job here, KJP.
Yeah.
If you're abbreviating.
So it's nice to see that. You can tell that she talks to the guy.
For better or for worse, this is a very outwardly transparent administration in that way. And yeah, she definitely talked to him. I think it was important for her to not have notes for today, to send the signal like, I'm going to do my homework, even though Kayleigh, who I think did a very good job in the first Trump administration, did have a big binder, and I think she was effective that way. I agree with you. I like the new media seat. She was, a little scrappy with some of the reporters getting into it. One who was saying very specific things he was asking about. She's like, I need some specifics. And he's like, I'm saying the specifics. But I think all in all, she would be thrilled with this as a first day.
So that was thorough.
You know, Judge, it's interesting because her only competition is Trump. Like, she's got a president. Her boss is almost as accessible, if not more accessible than her.
And it's interesting. That's my point. That this transparent, transformative press conference today was preceded by a nonstop daily serial pressers by the president since he put his left hand on the Bible. I mean, how many times a day have we seen President Trump? And there's no question that she and President Trump are close. They travel together. They're together. I mean, they have been together for years. I mean, she's very familiar with the family and with the president. So I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with the idea of the podcasters and social media, the content creators. And I think that this administration is so far ahead of the other administration in terms of its forward thinking. And how it capitalizes on everything, whether it's, you know, the podcasters and social media and the legacy media not being the only media allowed to come into these things. And, you know, like even the president with the dump truck and McDonald's. I mean, they just see and they capitalize on everything, and it's transparent. And I think she was young, confident,
very
incredible,
plucky.
And by the way, they're going to restore press passes to 440 journalists who had their passes revoked wrongly by the Biden administration, including one guy in particular, Simon Atiba. And I don't think she was plucky at all. I thought she said, this is where I work.
Plucky is a compliment, Judge.
Yeah.
I would like to move on to Jessie. Jessie, yet another female press secretary, which I love. I hate male secretaries.
I have one.
Oh, I know.
His name's Johnny. And by the way things are going, we could get Johnny credentialed for the briefing room.
Yes.
This is a good
That's
thing.
how low the bar's gone.
Oh, jeez.
I wouldn't say that. It's expansive. We've expanded it. She's so young, I feel proud of her. That's how I feel proud of her. Everybody was impressed. It was a great debut. And she led off brilliantly with the drone story.
Yep.
Very smart tactically. And she said, yeah, the drones were American government drones. We were doing research on drone technology. And Joe Biden lied to you.
Yep.
He lied to us. Why didn't he just tell us what the truth was about the drones? Why lie, Jessica? I'm talking to you, Jessica.
I'm intentionally not talking to you.
The drone lied about the drones.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, let's bring in Fox News contributor Katie Pavlis. She joins us now with more on this. 27 years old. She's got a lot of experience. I think she's an old soul. She's run for Congress. She narrowly lost the 1st Congressional District in New Hampshire. She worked at the White House before. She worked at Fox for a time as well. I thought she did a terrific job and no shortage of things to talk about in this first briefing.
Yeah, she worked as a deputy for our colleague and former press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, has a lot of experience with the press, ran from Congress, as you mentioned, and of course was a press secretary for the campaign. So she is well seasoned to take on this new task. She did a great job, covered a ton of topics, and it's great to see that the room was packed full of reporters who have to love this. I mean, if you were a White House press secretary, or rather correspondent under the Biden administration, it was a bit of a slog every day trying to get information about what the president was doing, answers to questions about what the federal government was implementing, and answers to the American people. But this time around, it was interesting to listen to the questions that were asked. I heard a lot of substantive questions. Some of them maybe were, you know, tough questions, but I didn't hear a lot of questions about character. And that's a difference from the first term and this term with the press corps, is they're seemingly, at least in the first day, are taking upon themselves to do their jobs, which is to serve the American people and get them information rather than serving themselves. So we'll see how long that lasts, but lots of substantive questions.
Yes, it's early days yet.
That's a great point.
The first day.
And, you know, she was here in December, shortly after she got the job, and she promised transparency, and she promised, you know, that there would be, you know, sort of something different happening in that briefing room, and we obviously just learned a little bit more about the details of that. Reading directly from her verbate there in the room, she said, my team will review the applications and give credentials to new media applicants who meet our criteria and pass United States Secret Service requirements to enter the White House complex. Talking about these two new seats. Starting today, the seat in the front of the room, which she said is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat. And Katie, I think this is really interesting because she's acknowledging that Americans get their news from so many other sources than the traditional mainstream media. They get it from podcasts, they get it from influencers on various social media outlets. So they're going to give those folks an opportunity to get a question in the briefing room.
Well, and Sandra, not only do Americans get their news from a bunch of different sources and different ways, but most importantly, this is about making sure there's a diversity of viewpoints in covering the news inside the White House. For far too long, there's been a liberal lock on the White House press corps and media generally. This allows the American people to really get different perspectives on covering the news of the day, maybe asking different questions that someone who works at a certain outlet or for a certain type of media wouldn't ask, and to serve a whole different audience. You know, when you're doing a press briefing, you can only get to so many different questions, and this gives people the opportunity to ask something on behalf of an audience that maybe isn't represented in that room on a daily basis. The country is a very diverse place. It's a huge country with lots of different opinions and people and issues that affect them at different levels than maybe people in New York or California. So it's an opportunity to bring a diversity of ideology and thought into the briefing room, which I think will serve the American people very well.
Just a quick correction. Karoline did not work for Fox. I used to see her every day in the lower press office, but unlike Katie and other folks, she did not spend any time here. She did have a rather heated exchange at one point, though, over the migrant crackdown. Let's play this and listen to it.
How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
I mean, you know, it was respectful back and forth. Obviously, she's armed with the facts. The fact that she only seemed to be reading from her notes a couple of times, and one time she was reading an official memorandum, really is quite a departure from the person who used to occupy that podium up until recently.
Yeah, she certainly has done her homework and has a lot of experience working with incoming cabinet officials, with members on Capitol Hill. She's been to Washington, D.C. before and lived here, worked here, understands how the government works. And she's very clear on what the president's agenda is, given how much time she spent with him and how many years she's worked for him. And she's happy to cite the law and say, look, I know that you think there should be exceptions for law breaking, but the law is that if you enter the country illegally and without permission, you indeed have broken it. And so she's answering those questions, and she started the briefing, as we say, off the top in this business with a long list of very violent criminals that they've been deporting. And of course, you have Kristi Noem, the just recently confirmed DHS secretary in New York today on some of those ICE raids.
Yeah, she said that they're going to restore the press passes of 440 individuals whose passes were wrongly revoked by the Biden administration. And to my earlier point, she said we welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. But while she's making those changes, I mean, she also did call on the AP and CNN and NBC in that room. So you can say, well done on getting them all in there. Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah. Boy, you know, talking about everything old is new again, you know, not just Mike Allen and David Sanger, with whom I sat in the Brady briefing room 25 years ago, but the fact that there were so many people there harkens back to the first days of the first Trump administration, when it was literally standing room only, and people were fighting to get in the door. And as Jackie was pointing out, she had to fight to get to her seat in the front row through so many people. I mean, it really is extraordinary to see that back there again.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, a little technical difficulty here and there is expected. Thanks, Katie.
Great to see you guys.
Thanks, Katie.
But breaking within the last few minutes, a federal judge is now temporarily blocking President Trump's freeze on funding for federal grants and loans. The president issuing the order while programs are being reviewed to make sure they comply with his recent executive actions. The freeze could potentially affect billions of dollars, but White House officials said today it would not impact Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, or any direct payments of assistance. Still, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calls it lawlessness and chaos. Senior White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich starts us off tonight live from the North Lawn. Good evening, Jackie.
Good evening, Brett. The decision blocks the funding freeze from going into effect until at least Monday at 5 p.m. There'll be a hearing that morning. The Biden-appointed judge, who's been on the D.C. District Court for about a year, cited the possibility of irreparable harm. The Trump administration has until Thursday afternoon to argue the merits of what it is trying to do. Some of that happened in the briefing today.
If you are receiving individual assistance from the federal government, you will still continue to receive that.
Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt's first White House briefing, dominated by questions about the Office of Management and Budget temporarily freezing all federal assistance programs affected by the president's executive orders, beginning at 5 p.m. today.
People are scrambling in all of our states to figure out what it means. I've gotten hundreds of calls from everybody: Head Start, hospitals, firefighters. What does this mean? What does this mean? People are worried. People are in a panic.
The order impacts programs affected by Trump's EOs on ending DEI, unleashing American energy, and reevaluating U.S. interests funding foreign aid and non-governmental programs, plus some others. And there were stated exceptions for programs like Social Security, Medicare, welfare, small businesses, farms, and Pell Grants. But the Medicaid website portal went down after the announcement, spurring confusion about the goals.
There was $37 million that was about to go out the door to the World Health Organization. DOJ and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza. That is a preposterous waste of taxpayer money. So that's what this pause is focused on, being good stewards of tax dollars.
Leavitt said after the briefing the Medicaid website glitch was unrelated and didn't affect any payments, but a supplemental memo from OMB also went out to clear up confusion. Quote, a pause could be as short as a day. In fact, OMB has worked with agencies and already approved many programs to continue even before the pause has gone into effect.
We are examining everything, taking a look at where money is going, how it is being spent, so that we can be responsible with taxpayer money, something the last administration frankly didn't care about.
Meantime, the administration is offering buyouts to federal workers who don't want to return to work in person. They've got until February 6th, just over a week, to take that offer or leave it. It allows deferred resignation, so you get to keep your pay and benefits and continue to work from home until September 30th. The White House expects between 5 and 10% of federal employees will quit, which would potentially save $100 billion in taxpayer funds annually. Brett.
Jackie, in a week, we've seen a flurry of executive orders. We're getting yet another executive order tonight from President Trump regarding transgender surgeries for children. What does that say?
Yeah, this new EO aims to protect children from what it calls experimental chemical and surgical mutilation. It orders agencies to use every available means to cut off any government participation in institutions that provide these kinds of surgeries. It also states taxpayers will no longer be funding transition surgeries through any federal employees' insurance plans. The Trump White House says this would put the U.S. more in line with European nations that have found the risks of treatment outweigh the benefits, and that 4 out of 5 kids outgrow gender dysphoria. That's the latest. Brett.
Jackie Heinrich, live on the North Lawn. Jackie, thank you. Let's get breaking tonight. President Trump's press secretary says the drones flying over much of the Northeast over the past few weeks do not belong to enemy forces. Karoline Leavitt saying today they were actually authorized by the FAA, raising more questions about previous answers from the previous administration. Correspondent Nate Foy is in Middletown Township, New Jersey tonight with the latest. Good evening, Nate.
Hey, Brett, good evening. So after more than 2 months of frustration and concern during the Biden administration, several residents in New Jersey tell Fox News tonight that they're grateful to President Donald Trump for following through on his promise and explaining, at least to some extent, what was going on with the mysterious drones over New Jersey for the past 2 months. Take a listen to White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt earlier today.
The drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not the enemy.
Brett, apparent drone sightings impacted a dozen states across the country, launching investigations by local, state, and federal agencies, all while former President Joe Biden and others in his administration would only say the drones posed no public safety threat.
nothing nefarious, apparently, but they're checking it all out. We're following it closely. So far, no sense of the danger.
Today's news from the White House means the FAA granted temporary flight restrictions because of drones that it authorized in the first place.
The FAA on the call was telling us that they had no record, no understanding as to where these drones were coming from. Now today, yeah, they were authorized by the FAA.
Middletown Mayor Tony Perry tells Fox the White House has promised more information to local leaders soon. He doesn't know exactly when quite yet, but there are still questions as to what kind of research was being done with these drones, although there's also comfort knowing that a foreign adversary was not behind it. Brett?
We'll keep asking the questions. Nate, thanks.
Wait a second. Good stewards of tax dollars? Like, when have we heard that? Well, not since the last Trump administration. Joining us now, Byron York, Washington Examiner, chief political correspondent, Fox News contributor. Byron, what is she, 27 years old? She was unbelievable.
Yep.
I was like, this is
absolutely
fabulous. Fabulous job.
The first thing to say about this is to compare today's briefing to every briefing of the last 4 years of the Biden administration, in which the spokesperson, Karine Jean-Pierre, either would not or could not engage with reporters on a daily basis. Today was an absolute breath of fresh air, should have been, for a reporter of any stripe.
Right, and also the White House's view on the First Amendment and the need to have a plethora of voices in that briefing room. Watch what she said.
The White House believes strongly in the First Amendment, so it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House.
Byron, the truth is, the elites, the old regime media, dinosaur media, whatever you want to call them, that's their territory. They don't like the little people going into their territory at all.
Yeah, and this comes after a long period of self-discrediting by a lot of reporters. I remember in the Biden White House press corps, there was a secret. That is, the president was not up to the job, and all the press was either looking the other way or claiming that he was when he was not. And the Biden administration kept very, very close hold on all sorts of information as far as the press was concerned, which was happy to look the other way. So today was just an absolute, complete explosion of openness and sunshine.
I loved it from beginning to end. I joined it late, watching late. I was like, oh, I missed the first. But the great thing about this also is it reveals the press's total hypocrisy on issues like inflation, because Trump's been in there for, what, 8 days? Or 8 days? But now they realize eggs are expensive. Watch.
Egg prices have skyrocketed since President Trump took office. So what specifically is he doing to lower those costs for Americans?
Really glad you brought this up, because there is a lot of reporting out there that is putting the onus on this White House for the increased cost of eggs. I would like to point out to each and every one of you that in 2024, when Joe Biden was in the Oval Office, or upstairs in the residence sleeping, I'm not so sure, egg prices increased 65% in this country.
Oh, the little dig at Biden sleeping. Well, I'm sorry, I enjoyed that. Maybe I shouldn't, but I did. They've now gotten actually a light bulb, Byron, on inflation, and now they're worried about spending, how much deporting illegal aliens is going to cost. I've never seen Democrats so worried about spending and inflation.
Well, this was actually a real shot across the bow for the more ideologically oriented members of the media, that if they put a false claim or a questionable claim in a question, it's going to be questioned in turn, and their premise of the question will be questioned. So that's a big deal, and it really suggests that you're just going to have much different interactions between the Trump White House and the press in the briefing room whenever there's a briefing.
Yeah, I think she enjoyed sparring with them as much as Trump does. So I think she loved it. It looks like she just enjoyed every minute of it, which was refreshing as well. Byron, wonderful to see you. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.